tell me about a moment of healing through the arts in your life.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's hard to pick a specific one because I think that's at the core of what has always drawn me to art making. It's sort of hard for me to even imagine what making art is if healing is not part of the process on just like a big scale and also a very specific scale. Like, I think my first real moment of understanding why I wanted to be an artist in my life was like in eighth, no, when was it? It's like 10th grade, maybe.
Okay.
10th or 11th grade. I was like, I had just come out. I'd been dealing with a lot of difficult stuff in my young life, and I got to play Hamlet as like an angry, 15-year-old queer girl who had a lot to say, and just like being able to access this like legendary character who, usually like Hamlet's he's a jerk, and he's so smart, and he's so powerful, and he's so selfish, and all of those things are not things women are ever allowed to be.
Yeah.
And like, maybe they're not the most positive qualities, but they're really important for women to be able to access. Yeah. And it was really important for me to access them. And I think in that moment, it really opened my eyes to how much engaging in artistic practices can allow us to access what we need to move through difficult experiences. And as I grew older, and like my writing and directing practices evolved, I have like gotten to the point with my writing where I write a lot about sexual violence, and I have had to, in a kind of cool and transgressive way, start publicly identifying as a survivor of sexual violence, because the work that I make, the whole goal is to kind of provide such a small narrative still of what that looks like. And I think it can leave a lot of survivors feeling alienated, and their story doesn't count, or it doesn't line up with what it's supposed to, and all that. And I had a conversation literally with an editor for like a big project I was doing. And, she was like, I'm a little nervous about this storyline. It's kind of controversial, like blah, blah, blah. And I was like, listen, if someone has an issue, they can talk to me. Like, it's no secret. I write about survivorship because I am one, and because every time I put those words down, I feel an affirmation for my own experience that it did happen, and that it was real, and it worked in this way. And then, the profoundness of the fact that even one person could come up and be like, wow, I saw my story in your story, and I feel affirmed, and I feel like it actually happened.
Okay, and why did that specific editor feel it was problematic? Because it was too hot or triggering a topic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's the problem. It's triggering because nobody talks about it, and when it weirdly pops up, everybody goes.
And people want, even when we're starting to make room for marginalized voices, people still want really black and white narratives. They don't want nuance. Like, they don't want anything that makes them uncomfortable, because the topic itself is so uncomfortable. So there's such a small kind of margin for what you're allowed to actually talk about when it comes to difficult experiences.
And I honor publications like Slate and others who will float those stories and make a big spread about a predator in my school or in my college, and this is what really happened. And I've read those spreads, and I've always gone, yes, we need to hear them. So would you say that the Hamlet play actually happened after the experience of sexual violence, and was also, in addition to the whole coming out and breaking out of the gender box, a healing moment where, let's say, you had an experience that most people would classify as shameful, And suddenly being very visible, stepping out of I've experienced something horrible and shameful into I am seen, or I'm just throwing bones here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's definitely true. All of that was happening at around the same time. And it, you know, when we go through hard things, especially in the realm of sexual violence, like in, uh, and also just like what it means to, I think, come out as a young woman when sexuality is so stigmatized for young women. And so the process of coming out feels like, hey, look at my sexuality. Like all of that is like, stop. The world is telling you to stop talking as much as possible. Like, please hide yourself away.
Yeah.
So I think playing this extremely bold, and again, just like narcissistic, angry, like all of these words that like girls need to be able to be when they're teenagers. Like all of that was really helpful for me. And I think, you know, as time grew on, or as time went on, I started realizing that I don't just have to use other people's words to claim experiences. I can start to use my own. And so that's when, you know, I realized that when you write about the hard things that have happened to you, bear witness to yourself. So even if someone wasn't there to watch what happened and affirm you, you can now affirm that younger version of yourself by saying, like, I saw that, I was there with you, it was hard. And then, you know, fingers crossed, the next person can read that and be like, oh my gosh, the stranger who wrote this text is affirming what I went through, you know?
Let me just, so writing, okay, if you are writing and publicly sharing experiences of, let's say, sexual violence, then you are performing an act of public healing. Because while your story is unique to you, the feelings, the big feelings you went through, are shared by others. And by sharing them publicly, you validate those who read along, who are like, that happened to me too. And you give them a chance to be seen and validated. What you happened is real, and what you happened is not okay. That kind of part of what you just said.
And I think that's definitely part of what I'm saying. And I think also just like it's breaking the silence around something that is supposed to not be talked about. And so, you know, breaking the silence about things in my own life has been really important. And then working collaboratively with other artists who are trying to break the silence on their own things that they need to break the silence on. And then we're putting art out in the world that other people, it's almost, sometimes I feel like if you don't make art about something, it almost doesn't exist because it just exists in your head. And like it exists in the experience you had that so often no one else knows about. But once you put it in the world in this sort of, and you know, I'm also very mindful that if people are just like trauma dumping into their art, it's not very good art. Like it has to still be structured and polished, and it's not, art isn't about like doing your own personal therapy, but I think like it can be, but that's like, you know, art therapy. Yeah. But I think when you're doing it professionally, it's just about creating space to create a story that other people can latch onto, and that you can heal through.
I had this really cool, I love fiction. Short fiction is kind of my jam. And I had a really cool teacher from the Iowa program. And he said, number 3 things you want to achieve in your writing is you want it to be sad, beautiful, and funny. Yeah. So if you take a trauma experience and don't just dump it out and make like this really dark play, or people just screaming and suffering, everyone is like, oh my God, I can't even sit through this. You're creating something that captures the agony to some extent, but puts it together with moments that are beautiful and maybe even funny. And the whole thing becomes watchable and consumable. We can integrate it. We can say, yes, there is human connection and love is what surrounds us all. And in the middle of connection of love, stuff happens. There are these black blotches of horrible experiences, and we must make them visible within this circle. And I think the beautiful and the funny make that safe circle in which the horrid and the sad can be seen, right?
Totally. And it's also just like, that's life, you know, like something awful happens to you. And then the next morning, like your tire blows out in your car. And you're just like, well, fuck, you know, it's like life just keeps being life no matter what. And life continues to be fun and nice and also just dark. So,
do you have, as a final word, any advice to young artists who feel drawn to the medium of theater and writing, and who feel like, yeah, I have scary things to tell, but I'm so scared and I don't know how? Do you have any advice how to get started with that really scary project?
Yeah, totally. I think for writing, I would say like the tried and true phrase, write what you know. Like always come back to who you are and what you've been through instead of trying to be what you think you're supposed to be or write what you're supposed to write. Like what you have, the weirdness and uniqueness and beautifulness of you, as boring or as unworthy as maybe sometimes you feel, is actually your superpower as a creator. And then, you know, similar with acting, like I mentor a lot of young women and young queer people I have a theater company within that theater company, which is called Project Nongenue. And like a lot of them are like, I don't see my type in the industry. I don't see who I am in movies and plays or whatever. So it must mean that I don't belong. But in reality, it's like, if you don't see yourself up there, that's exactly why you have to keep making work, because you're not the only one who's like you. And there are so many people who would feel so moved by your story. So like, just like, it's time to stop letting the dominant narratives dictate how we feel about ourselves and just start taking up space as the like weirdos and marginalized and like beautiful sort of warriors of tomorrow's stories come out.
And that's where intergender casting comes in, because like you in the Hamlet, just take an unexpected gender, body type, age group, whatever, put it in that role. And some, you know, if everybody works on this with their best talents, something amazing is going to happen. And this original great narrative is going to it's going to be transformed into a narrative that maybe hasn't been told in that way before. It's perfect. Exactly. It all comes together. Yay. That's I think we're also landing on the final point that intergender casting is also a form of healing through the arts, because it invites us to enjoy a classic narrative that maybe we have heard or seen before, with a completely different character at its center that wasn't so visible before, and that heals us all to see that the angry young 15-year-old teenager is a Hamlet and is tragic and self-evolved and important and beautiful and funny and sad and all the things. So I think that's a great landing point, and we should make this into a podcast. It's just so good.